everyone, and welcome. I am Joy Stafford with the Healthcare Partnerships team at MDA. Thank you for joining us today for the MDA Industry Update webinar, The Evolving Therapeutic Landscape for Becker Muscular Dystrophy, an update part 3. And thank you for all you do for MDA and the neuromuscular community. MDA's clinical industry update webinars are programs which provide an opportunity for the medical community to receive information and updates impacting care and treatment directly from pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and medical equipment companies. These webinars are just a part of MDA's medical education resources. We encourage you to visit the medical education pages of mda.org. You will find resources such as considerations for care case studies, recorded grand round webinars, research grants, and so much more. Now, I would like to turn it over to John Wing from Edgewise Therapeutics for today's webinar.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you to the MDA for all the great work that you do for the community. As mentioned, this is part 3 of our 3-part series on the evolving therapeutic landscape for Becker muscular dystrophy. So we thank you for joining today. We thank you all for joining the previous 2. Next slide, please. So this is just a forward-looking statement, and to let you know that Edge 5506 is an investigational agent, is not approved in any territory. So next slide, please. So my name is John Wing, as mentioned, and I'm the Executive Director of Medical Affairs at Edgewise Therapeutics. I'm doing this brief introduction. Joanne Donovan, our Chief Medical Officer, will be doing the rest of the presentation in a moment. So next slide, I'll give you a quick introduction of our program today. So the statement that we've been going with for the past 3 programs, and we believe is a very important statement, is to attempt to bring awareness to the community of Becker muscular dystrophy, because Becker is a serious dystrophinopathy. Declining function can begin at different ages, but once it begins, those with Becker are on an irreversible path to losing muscle and consequently function. So for this 3rd part of our series, we will discuss the following. Joanne will give a brief recap of our previous programs, and then we're going to put the data into perspective for the community. And then lastly, do a review and update of our clinical programs in Becker muscular dystrophy, including the recently announced Grand Canyon, a global pivotal trial. So next slide. I think it's off to you, Joanne.
Great. Thank you. So my name is Joanne Donovan. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Edgewise. And thank you to MDA for giving us this opportunity to speak with you today. So we had spoken before, and those webinars are up and accessible, but talking about the clinical course and natural history of Becker muscular dystrophy. And how do we define the disease, the pathophysiology, and the clinical consequences, importantly. We heard actually from a individual living with Becker muscular dystrophy, and I think it was a very poignant understanding of what it's like and the limitations and the challenges. It is, like many muscular dystrophies, something that has serious impact on daily life of adults with this disease. And then speak to also the emerging clinical trial landscape. And I'll speak to you a bit more about later on, since that first one, of a clinical trial opportunity in Becker that we are undergoing. So Becker, we know that Becker and Duchenne are on a spectrum. They both lack the full amount of functional dystrophin. In Duchenne, essentially no functional dystrophin. Becker, a limited amount of dystrophin, but not enough to protect the muscle against the contraction-induced damage that is really the fundamental pathophysiology of the disease, that with extreme muscle function, with particularly eccentric muscle function, the membrane is unable to protect itself, and that leads to damage. So we are, I will add, we are also looking at Duchenne muscular dystrophy as well as other muscular dystrophies in clinical trials. But today I'm going to focus on Becker muscular dystrophy. As I mentioned, the fundamental issue is that in this and several muscular dystrophies is that the dystroglycan complex is not able to function normally. And dystrophin typically does allow the diffusion of force across the muscle. It's shown here in green that it links muscle fibers. And when a subset of muscle fibers contract, because they don't all contract together, then that allows the force to be spread across the muscle. Without dystrophin, that happens one by one, and the muscles cannot contract then and prevent damage to the muscle. So with contraction, you see progressive damage. And that's the fundamental pathophysiology of the disease. So we then talked about why we are particularly targeting fast muscle fibers in Becker muscular dystrophy, and in particular, how we can use biomarkers of muscle damage to give a better understanding of how the muscle damage occurs and how we can potentially protect against that muscle damage. We showed some recent 12-month data from an open label study, ARCH, that's a phase 1b study of EDG 5506 in adults with Becker. And what EDG 5506 is specifically target those fast muscle fibers. Now, what we've seen in this 12-month study is that we've seen profound decreases in these biomarkers. So with CK, we saw a 37% decrease after a year. It happened early. It was highly statistically significant, and it was maintained at a year. We looked at fast skeletal muscle troponin, and again, we saw this early. We saw that it was maintained through a year, an 80% decrease. And as you can see, almost all of these patients are really down to negligible levels that would be consistent really with normal levels of that would be seen in healthy individuals, and hence protection against activity-induced muscle damage. So so basically what we also looked at was the North Star ambulatory assessment. And I'll go into that a little bit more. It's been used, as you probably know, more in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but it also examines the kind of muscular ambulatory activities that patients are compromised in Becker muscular dystrophy. And what we know is that in the natural history of the disease, that there would be about a 1.2 point difference or decrease in North Star. These patients are deteriorating. And instead, they were stabilized, and there was a trend towards improvement, with instead of the average being down, 3/4 of the patients were stable. And when you talk to patients, certainly in your practice, you understand that if they could just stay where they are, that would be really important for them. So the putting this in perspective, and this is what we are trying to do, is understand, well, what does this mean over a longer period of time? So if we know the North Star decreases an average of 1.2 points, what does that mean for an individual? We know that once they have North Stars that are below the maximum, there's a maximum of 34 with North Star. When you get below 32, there is progressive replacement of muscle by fat and fibrosis, and then the disease progresses over time. So there is limited natural history data in Becker, and one of the best examples is from the Italian group from Luca Bello and his colleagues in Padua. And what they have done is looked at individuals over 5 years And this shows the North Star on the y-axis for patients various ages at baseline. And they're also looking at different colors that look at different mutations. And a lot of people talk about that Becker is a heterogeneous disease, like many musculoskeletal diseases that progress at different rates. But it seems as though there are kind of two groups of patients, and the patients that are up here at 34 at maximal in the North Star, they're not changing very much. But once they start to decline, once they start to develop more fat and fibrosis in their muscles, they're declining at a fairly reproducible rate. The rate is very constant here. So it allows us to look at and enroll a clinical trial to understand this better. Now, the North Star has a number of different measures, as you know, and they are measures that are important in terms of daily life. I mean, even things like being able to get to sitting, to be able to stand on one leg or stand from a chair are things that are important in terms of real world events in these people's lives during many adult decades. So what we did to try to understand that better is to look at try to understand, well, what does a particular North Star mean to an individual? So you're going down at one or 2 points a year. That doesn't sound like much. What does it really mean to move over that range over a period of time? And so what we did was we looked at North Star scores in a number of patients where we had recorded these North Stars with the help of the investigators. And we looked at what it meant basically to have North Stars in the 30s, in the 20s, in the teens, and less than 10. And looked at, well, what are the functions that they're losing? What are the functions that they are compensated for? Remember, the North Star 2 means they have the function that's intact. 1 is they're compensating, but they are able to do it and that's typically because of weakness. And then at 0, where they've completely lost it. So this is not a natural history study. This is looking cross-sectionally at the North Star in this patient group. So kind of going from group 1, things are good. And it probably takes at about 1.2 years, about 5 years, 8 years, and 8 years. So this is happening over time. But if you're a 30-year-old guy, this is an important time frame. What are you going to look like in 8 years? So if you look at let me talk you through this graph here. If you look at what patients with North Stars in their 30s look like, then this shows in the vertical scale the percentage of patients that are within have lost a function, the blue, or are compensating for it but can still do it. And so things are pretty good in the 30s. They can compensate for certain things, particularly the rise from floor, or standing on their heels. But essentially, they retain these functions, but there is a little bit of compensation going on here. And then when they're in their North Star of 20s, and you think of that as, it's pretty good. 20s is close to 34. And what's happening there is they can complete most functions, but they need to compensate because of developing weakness and progressive weakness. So the orange is, well, what things are they not able to do as an unaffected person would be? And these are ordered, I should also add, from the easiest to do, at least for patients with Duchenne, to the most difficult, hopping on one foot versus standing unassisted. And even some things like standing up from a chair requires some compensation. They've got to push with their arms as you get up because of the weakness in the quads. With going up and down stairs, they are starting, and that's obviously very important to be able to go up or down a curve. Walking or running, they're not speeding up. They're not able to get up if they fall. And we heard that from the person who was living with Becker. And then another maybe 8 years or so, depends on the person. And now what's happening? Now there's a lot of blue here. So they started to lose a number of functions. And they're compensating for virtually all of them. But the losing the ability to go up or down a step and is obviously quite important. And they're still having a lot of trouble with getting up out of chairs. And then when you get down another 8 years, this is a meaningful time scale here. The North Star there, everything is really problematic. They're unable to do many of these ambulatory functions. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what it means to have a North Star declining at 1.2 points per year. So what we are doing at Edgewise is developing EDG 5506 in clinical trials for Becker muscular dystrophy. And we have several trials ongoing. The ARCH study is what I told you about. That's an ongoing 24-month study. Canyon is also a phase 2 study in Becker. These trials are fully enrolled. And what we have opened enrollment for in September is Grand Canyon, which is a pivotal study in ambulatory adult men ages 18 to 50 with Becker. And that is a global study. Will be followed by an open label extension that is actually getting up and running now to allow patients who have been in any of these studies to continue on EDG 5506 with open label drug. So the Grand Canyon study is an 18-month study. It's global. We've got many sites in the US to evaluate the safety and efficacy of EDG 5506 in persons living with Becker. The primary endpoint is North Star Ambulatory Assessment. We'll also be looking at time function tests, MRI, biomarkers, and patient-reported outcomes as well. Because of the safety data that we have to date, we've been able to make this relatively patient-friendly for patients to participate in. So after screening, there is a limited number of visits, 6 visits over 18 months. So this is an oral drug given once a day. So we're trying to make the burden of participating in the study as minimal as possible. 2 patients will get EDG 5506 versus 1 with placebo. And we'll be looking at these endpoints at the study visits with periodic check-ins by phone as well. The more detailed inclusion criteria are available on clinicaltrials.gov. We are looking for adults age 50, up to age 50 and above 18 with a documented dystrophin mutation, a phenotype of Becker, which basically means that they're ambulatory past 16 years without steroids or past 18 on steroids. They need to be able to complete the 100-meter time test in less than 200 seconds with or without the use of a mobility aid cane, for example. And we're looking for patients that can do the North Star Ambulatory Assessment with a score of 5 to 32. So again, we're looking for that group of patients that has relatively reproducible decline over time. And that will allow us to power a study. Overall, we're looking for about 120 patients. The exclusion criteria, unremarkable medical history that would be concerning, We are doing MRI. It's very robust assessment of looking at the deterioration in the leg muscles. So that's an important part of the study. Certain pulmonary restrictions. We are looking at people that are not on corticosteroids. The vast majority of Becker patients are not on that. So that's who we are enrolling. We have a lot of sites across the United States. The orangish ones are the ones that are actively recruiting, but even in the time that this slide has been made, there's more that are becoming active. So hopefully there would be a referral center that's close to you. We also have additional sites in the UK, Netherlands in the near future, and more later in Europe as well. So to summarize, Becker, as we started, it's a serious dystrophinopathy. What we want to avoid is the transition to non-ambulatory. So we want to be able to stop, stabilize, and potentially improve function in these patients. Because once you've lost muscle, it's irreversible. And that leads to irreversible loss of function. We have heard about the multiple challenges in living with Becker, and we've tried to make the clinical trial as friendly as possible. We know that contraction-induced injury is an important part of the process, and if we can protect these fibers, we can hopefully slow the functional decline. One of the other things that we found listening to the community is just a need for understanding more about Becker. That this is a community that in a lot of times has been lost to the neurology, the neuromuscular experts, and they're not coming back year after year, but they need to. They need to get their cardiovascular assessments made and interventions on a regular basis. So we, along with all of the studies that are enrolling patients in the United States, at this point there are 4, have sponsored, along with a lot of the key academic sites, and MDA, PPMD, are sponsoring Becker Education and Engagement Day. It will be at 4 sites. We've got the website on here. 4 sites across the United States, simultaneous, and experts will be speaking about neuromuscular care, cardiac care, other aspects of the disease, and people will come to different sites, Pittsburgh, UC Davis in California, Gainesville in Florida, and Denver, Colorado, to be able to also meet other folks with Becker. Many of them have never met somebody else with Becker. So we would really encourage you to ask to share this information with your clinic folks, and if they are interested in coming, there is some travel support as well available for people. So it'll be simulcast and in person at these sites as well. So with that, I will close, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. I am not seeing a lot. I don't know, Joy, if you, I guess I'm not, oh, here we go.
In the Q&A, where can we find the recordings of the 3 presentations? That is on the MDA website, is one of the places where you can find this in our medical education area.
Yeah. They're also on the Edgewise website as well as contact information and a link to for patients to get more information about the trial. Very good.
There's a question in the chat. Oh, is there a potential to study this sort of therapy in DMD as well? You mentioned that briefly.
Yes, absolutely. So there are 2 ongoing trials right now in Duchenne, one in boys 4 to 9. And that is a study to identify the right dose for a phase 3 study. We have also started a trial in those individuals who have previously received gene therapy, and we are again looking at biomarker effects and safety, and that is ongoing at a number of sites across the United States. Very good.
Okay.
Good.
I think that's it for the questions.
Joy?
Autumn put the link for the webinars on the chat. So for those of you in that, please copy that or access it now while you can.
Yes, and thank you all so much for sharing. We appreciate Edgewise Therapeutics for the insightful presentation and for all of our medical professionals for attending today's program. We hope that you all will join us again in the future for another industry update webinar, and hope you all have a wonderful day.